everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Monday after a weekend that was just incredibly hot, especially yesterday, where we had temperatures up in the middle to upper 90s. I just want to point out a couple of things, at least so far, and I want to go back when we were looking at all this evolve late last week. If you remember, we had especially the GFS throwing out these incredibly ridiculous high temperature numbers, and we're not even talking heat indices. We were talking actual temperatures, at least on the maps. The numerical guidance never quite got as extreme, but they were still throwing some numbers out over 100 for Philadelphia, for Newark, and a few other places, and particularly up in New England, where you had the map printouts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon showing these numbers like at 104, 105. Did not happen, obviously. Did it get to the upper 90s? Yes. Did some spots get to 100? Yeah, a few did, but I have to tell you that at least from southeastern Pennsylvania northeastward to about New York City, a number of the areas that were indicated that were going to go over 100 never quite got there. It made middle 90s and it made upper 90s in some places, but other than some of the local thermometers, none of the major airports and even the minor airports that are part of the observation system reported temperatures over the century mark, at least again in that corridor that I'm talking about. There were some places in interior Connecticut that got to 100 or 101. I didn't pay too close attention as to what I can do it. I'll do it off camera. Just let me just really quick. I can check Hartford yesterday, and we'll bring up Hartford's observation, 3-day observation. Right now, they're at 90. As far as the high temperatures were concerned, only getting to 93 today, and yesterday Hartford got to 95. Okay, so there were a few of the local thermometers as part of some of the local networks that managed to see temperatures up well into the 90s and around the century mark. So this is the second time that we've seen models get really overzealous when we get into we started into the mid-range of the forecast, where they get overzealous with the heat and the temperatures, and as we've gotten closer and closer, they've kind of pulled back from those numbers. Make no mistake, it's miserably hot and miserably humid, and we can show you just how miserably hot and miserably humid it is. And I hope that, it did. Why did it do this? I had this map all beautifully set up for you folks, and it wound up resetting itself. So let me just do this really fast. Just going to add a little bit of ob density, some size, and we'll take off the wind barbs, at least for now. And these are 6 p.m. temperatures now. We've come off the highs, but I want you to look at what's happened along coastal areas. We had temperatures today in many areas that were at or ahead of where we were at that same time frame yesterday. We had temperatures already up to 95 or 6 in some places as of noon. So you were going to be right on your way to 100 easily, except for the fact that we were talking about that today would be the day that the south wind would kick in, and it finally has. So that's why you're seeing temperatures, say, on eastern Long Island, for example, in the upper 70s right now. Also coastal Connecticut, Bridgeport, these are 6 o'clock readings, 81, 82 at New Haven. New London is 77. I don't know what that 69 is, unless it's somebody standing right in the water. Narragansett is at 75. Providence at the airport there at 79. So it's really kind of cooled off along coastal areas. The humidity hasn't disappeared, however. The dew points are ridiculously high. And then even the inland areas, which were up in the middle 90s, have come back to low 90s or even near 90. Some spots in eastern New Jersey in the upper 80s, and also in southern Queens. I think that might be Kennedy Airport, not sure. But again, the south wind makes a difference. It didn't make much of a difference in and around Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, where we've got a reading of 99, Philly downtown 95. Then I'm not, what is that station there? Mount Holly at 97. Mercer County for Trenton is at 95. So this is kind of where the hottest air occurred today. And also back into south central PA, where we had temperatures in the middle 90s. 95 in and around Harrisburg, looked like about 97. Lancaster at 95. And right now in Westminster in Maryland, at Carroll County Regional Airport, it is 102. Okay, Frederick is at 97. So with the upper high kind of pivoting a bit and beginning its move westward, which is eventually going to lead to a split, we saw a shift in the high temperatures today. Also, let me bring out the latest. This is the radar. I'm going to overlay the radar here. Let me bring this full screen. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I left it half screen. I apologize for that. But you can see the numbers here, middle 90s and down in parts of Maryland, where I said we were at 102 at Westminster. Also now, we are seeing a fire up of a line of strong to even some potentially severe storms out in central Pennsylvania, westward through upstate New York. And by the way, these areas here in upstate New York were in the middle 90s as well. These were areas that were forecast by the models to go over 100 over the weekend and today. And I went and looked at a few places like Syracuse and Rochester. It never quite made it there. Middle 90s on up through the Hudson Valley, low 90s into Vermont. You can see the extent of 80s, how it's pushed in this evening with that wind, the component of the wind, a bit more from off the water. The thunderstorms are not being caused by any particular cold front, really. Just elevation, lift, very high dew points. You probably have some kind of weak system in the upper atmosphere that's moving through. The real relief is going to come on Friday. That is really the next big weather change, as we advertised. And the other thing is that we are going to see perhaps a better chance for some pop-up storms in my neck of the woods starting on Tuesday and then taking us through Thursday before we get into what I think could be a serious round of thunderstorms for Friday. Here's your severe weather risk tonight across the Northeast, that area of slight risk, and the radar certainly reflecting that with the thunderstorms that have developed there. Also, we're seeing slight risk in parts of the plains and on up through the northern plains and into parts of western Minnesota. Throughout the southeast and Gulf states and Florida, you've got some areas of showers and storms, general areas of showers and thunderstorms with some heavy downpours. But the area you see here in the central Gulf is part of a tropical disturbance. And, you know, I got to just point this out because it really bugged me. But a certain weather network, I won't say who, happened to get a notification from them about they had a live camera from New Orleans, from the French Quarter, and the headline read, "New Orleans braces for rain." So I kind of messaged them back and I said, you know, saying something like New Orleans braces for rain is kind of like saying Alaska braces for cold. It really doesn't have a whole lot of meaning, okay? In New Orleans, it rains. It rains every single day in New Orleans from June on into September. Usually by early to mid-afternoon, somebody's got a thunderstorm going on somewhere. So you kind of have to be a bit more specific about what you're referring to. And actually, what is causing it today is brought up the Gulf of Mexico satellite loop here. And there is a tropical disturbance that's flaring up. For that matter, in terms of the satellite structure, it has a bit of character to it, a little bit of curvature. The problem with regards to development is that the area is very close to land, or at least where you might think a low center could develop here is very close to land. This was something that the European model picked on picked up on last week, and so did the GFS to a lesser extent. The Hurricane Center actually does mention this today, but indicates they only have a 10% chance of development out of this, and mainly because of the fact that this whole thing is so close to land that there just may not be enough room, and that it'll eventually work its way inland. With regards to the system that's out in the Atlantic, and I'm going to bring this up because you do have, actually, you've got an upper low, and then you can almost pick out what might be a very weak surface swirl here out off the coast of Florida. But that, again, upper air, this really kind of has the look of a broad, there's a broad upper air low that is sitting there, a cold core low. And something like this, in order to develop, it would take many days for it to happen. By the way, you can see the flare-up of the thunderstorms north and west up and through Pennsylvania and upstate New York. You can see how those clouds just build up. I love this GOES 16 because of the just incredible detail. They are primarily developing west of the mountains of central Pennsylvania and through north central New York. And there have been a number of severe thunderstorm warnings and even a few flash flood warnings that are being indicated. As far as the system out in the Atlantic is concerned, I just don't think that this is going to be able to do anything, because it would probably have to sit out there for at least a week, and eventually this is all going to be pushed back westward into Florida and into the southeast. It'll probably enhance showers there at some point later this week. And in fact, with regards to that, the Weather Prediction Center for its 7-day outlook here does have, still showing some hefty rains through the Gulf states. The purple's all 2 inches or more, and you can see it's kind of concentrated over the southern portion of Louisiana into southeast Texas on one side, and maybe into southern Mississippi on the other. As far as the Northeast is concerned, this is all going to be probably driven by either how much produced by pop-ups, and then late on Friday, which is really the next big weather change event as far as the East is concerned. Whenever you're under a big ridge aloft that sits over you for a couple of days and is so dominant in the overall upper air pattern, it's going to be very hard to initiate, anything to happen. So in terms of the broad scale, and that's not going to come till Friday, so we're going to be watching this through the whole week. Where did my... Boy, I had stuff set up. I don't know what I did here. All right, so here's, by the way, I just popped up. This is the national radar. Give you a better view here of what's going on. Okay, I wasn't supposed to do that. There you go. But here's some of the big cells that are moving at the moment through upstate New York. Remember, when you're watching here on the live stream, it's real time, obviously. We're at 13 minutes after 6 o'clock Eastern time. But if you're watching this video on the replay, obviously you're looking at old data. So be sure to check your local National Weather Service office for any of the latest radars and any watches and warnings that are up. We can go to the local radar at upstate New York at this point and take a look. It looks like, when you got these boxed yellows here, those are severe thunderstorm warnings that have been issued for parts of north central New York. Looks like south of Syracuse, where the main action is. They're going northwest of Binghamton. We also have some activity down in through western Pennsylvania, as we showed you earlier. Again, these are the 6 o'clock radars. Looks like a couple of scattered severe thunderstorm warnings in the mix here. But none of this stuff is coming eastward. This is all going to weaken after about 7 or 8 o'clock as we go into the nighttime hours. This will all go away. So why don't we take a look at what the models are doing going forward. I think this is a good time, and I want to start with, we're going to start with the upper air overall. I'll start with the new GFS, and then when we get into the long range, we can switch over to the old GFS, and I'm going to back away to Sunday morning, so you can see how the ridge in the east is changing in terms of its orientation and its structure. Here we are on Sunday morning, where the upper high along the east coast was basically achieving its maximum intensity, oriented north-south. You've got this trough in the northern plains extending up into western Canada. So that brings the cool air down into that part of the country. So you've got a deep trough in one spot, big ridge in the other. That's usually how this all tends to work. And as we go through the next several days, so here we are today, and you can already see how the ridge is changing. It's starting to kind of tilt to the east and to the west, where you have the core of the ridge right over the coast, but it is weakening a bit, but you're getting the ridge to look more oriented east-west, and then starts to split as we go through this week and begins to shift to the west. So what does that do? Well, watch the jet in Canada. I'll back it up, and you can see how the jet stream in Canada begins to penetrate into the ridge as it splits, and this brings a strong shortwave trough into the eastern part of the United States at the end of this week. This is going to bring a cold front, a very active cold front, and I think one that has the potential to produce some strong thunderstorms when it moves on through. Behind it will be some really delightful air for next weekend as we've got that flow coming down from Canada. The ridge now is out in the Atlantic, and you've got the ridge out in the west centered over Utah, and that trough right along the east coast. Now, I think what we're going to see going forward is more along. You notice how if you look up in Canada where all the dark blue is, we have for this time of year, a fairly strong vortex at the 500 millibar level, and a relatively active jet there. So I think what you're going to see is shortwave troughs that are going to attempt to carve out a trough in the eastern part of the U.S. That seems how the model wants to go here. And you also have a little bit of blocking that starts to develop up in Greenland, which kind of supports this notion. And as a result, a little bit more of a west-based block. And as a result, this could be, a period of at least where temperatures are closer to average, if not below average. I think that with respect to, long duration heat waves, we're going to go back to a tough time of that happening in the east anyway. Yeah, you'll get the occasional day or maybe 2 days where it gets very warm to hot, but a cold front will put an end to that. Meanwhile, with the ridge going out in the west, that would certainly argue for in the long range that it may get hot in the western part of the U.S. Where it has not been very hot at all. So when we look at the surface map, and we'll come back to present time here. I'll just jump to the 18Z so you guys can see the latest run of the GFS. Levi Cowan, tropicaltidbits.com, folks. Those are the maps we use. Leon, by the way, if you go to Tropical Tidbits, you can support what Levi is doing by going on his Patreon link that's on there, and it explains how you can support Levi Cowan and what he's doing with the Tropical Tidbits, which is just phenomenal. Meanwhile, here we go. As we look at the GFS, again, the argument for some pop-up thunderstorms here on Tuesday and again on Wednesday, the 4th of July. Thursday, yeah, there might be the scattered cell. And then on Friday, here comes that cold front that really looks fairly impressive to me. I'm going to pull up. Let me see if I can get this. Let's see. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Nope, that's not what I wanted either. Bear with me, folks. Might not be available for this. I just wanted to kind of show, at least from the upper air, that we do have, this is not a half bad looking shortwave that's coming down. So that might trigger off some strong thunderstorms. You can see that the core of that shortwave goes by to our north, but it's still a pretty decent shortwave trough with a deepening upper low up near Labrador. So you get that shortwave to rotate around, interacting with all these ridiculously hot and humid hot conditions, but particularly the humidity with the dew points very high. And by the way, that brings up another point I want to make. With regards to my local area here, over the next few days, we are going to have more of a south wind, okay? And if you look closely, bring up the close-up shot here. Starting with, the south wind kicked in this afternoon. You can see the isobars here are coming in more off the water. Here's that low-level swirl off the Florida coast that really doesn't do very much. It's kind of like an inverted trough, but the isobars off the Atlantic running from Bermuda to about Long Island. So the flow now is not westerly. You're not getting a west wind, but more of a south-southeast wind. That is going to continue all this week. So I think that takes away from the extreme heat, but the humidity is going to be very high with dew points in the 70s. And that's why when this front comes through on Friday, you could have a pretty juiced up atmosphere from the standpoint of tropical moisture. So I think some of these thunderstorms could indeed be rather strong. And here's that nice, look at that 1026 high coming down for Saturday. A nice high builds in. It's a pretty decent shot of cool air. In fact, when we look at Sunday morning, just an early look at temperatures, this is at 2 a.m. Sunday. You've got 50 and maybe even some upper 40s in some of those areas shaded in green. It does manage to get it back into the 80s, but on Saturday, 70s to near 80. Some places in upstate New York not out of the 60s, and then it kind of jumps back up to the 70s on Sunday. So the dew points are also going to be really, really nice and low. So that front actually pushes pretty far to the south off the southeast coast of the U.S. So it gets, for this time of year, fronts sometimes have a tough time getting south of 35 degrees north. So this one actually makes a pretty good push southward. Sometimes, by the way, when you get these stalled fronts out, we have had instances of tropical systems that develop where you get a wave that develops on the front, and then that wave gradually makes a transition over into a tropical system. We don't see that here at the moment on the models, but just want to point that out, that sometimes that does happen. And then I think what you'll see in the longer term is that, yeah, these highs will go out, and then you're going to get some warm-ups, but when we go into the early part of the following week, now we're talking the week of July 9th, by Tuesday, July 10th, there's another weather front that's coming on through, and then that goes out, and then yet another one follows toward the end of that week as we get into July 13th and 14th, another front goes by. So it looks like with that jet stream strengthening in Canada that we're going to see weather fronts coming through every 2 or 3 days, rather than have these big upper highs building along the East Coast. So if you are not a fan of prolonged heat and humidity, well, just try and hang on this week, because after that it looks like the pattern will at least go back to something a bit more reasonable. And I think you can compare it to something the way it was during the month of June. Nick Cortese, forever the heat lover and the man who can't get over the fact that it is hotter in most Julys than it is during August. Thank you for hitting Super Chat. I really appreciate it. Abinos, if I read that correctly, welcome. You're new. Welcome to my channel. Our local weather app says this weekend will be 100 to 110 in Southern California. Any reason why? Okay, give me a little more specific here. Southern California, sir. Where are you? Are you near the coast? Are you near LA? Are you inland and west? Because it makes a huge difference. With the ridge building out in the west, it does bring, as we touched upon earlier, with that upper high in the east right now, shifting to the western part of the United States late this week. The hot weather is going to shift into the west for a bit. So just bear that in mind. And I think that's why your app is showing the numbers that it's showing. But I'm just kind of curious as to Inland Empire. Okay, can you give me maybe a major city where that's near? I'm not familiar with it. Johnny Quest, 91. Storms show up. Never really got high heat, but was very humid. Johnny Quest, this is what we were been talking about, where all that rain you had, probably, San Bernardino. Yeah, you're getting the heat. It makes total sense for you you're going to get in the heat, by the way. I'm sorry, let me get back to Johnny Quest. All that rain the upside to all that rain is the fact that the soil moisture content is so high that you are going to see the highs, those brutal high temperatures, are going to have a tough time. But it doesn't mean it's not going to be humid. It is going to be. But in terms of getting to extreme numbers, it's going to be, tough for you to do with the wet ground. Now, on the other hand, you've seen it in years where it's been bone dry. That's when you kind of err the other way, and you wind up being warmer than what's indicated. Southeast Florida lightning, Ruru 23. Yeah, someone was one of my friends was down there, and he told me that particularly with the sea breeze front, you're got some really hefty thunderstorms that have developed. I'm trying to catch to everybody's comment. Israel. I saw the perspective weather mentioned that he also showing the forecast like you do, and I was showing the ridge north of Florida up through the northeast, and said that opens up the door for tropical. Well, I think what it opens the door up for is the tropical moisture that is coming with that ridge turning east-west. So you can see how the low level with the isobars, with the high off the Atlantic coast, you're going to get this southeast flow. It keeps you from getting very hot, but it doesn't keep you from getting ridiculously humid. So if you got something in the atmosphere running around, that could trigger off a shower or thunderstorm, which is why I put in for increasing chances over the next couple of days. And weather NLO 78. Please stop. Okay, you go off the deep end by watching other people, and then you message me unrelentingly about stuff that is silly, and I'm not going to address it. So that's the end of that. I think Israel gave you the right answer. Barrow, Alaska is 44. Heat wave for you, the folks in Barrow. Absolutely. Rain coming, Priscilla May in Louisiana, with that tropical disturbance moving westward and moving inland. So you might be getting some of the rain that you need. Fingers crossed for you. And yes, I know Nick asked me this, and I agree that the thunderstorms Friday have the potential for having some punch to them, and I think we're going to look at that a bit closer as we go through the week. Chris Alley, happy 4th of July to you too. I'm kind of working my way backwards on the chat. Car Show Channel, hi, how you doing? Nice to see you here, and welcome. Gunther, good to see you too. Axis 2084, expecting round of some very serious storm when this heat breaks. Friday's your day, and we certainly are going to have a souped up atmosphere from the standpoint of moisture. So Friday is going to be the day. Scott Briller, for once the Farmer's Almanac was right. It predicted sunny, hot July 3rd, and then 4 to 7 showers and cooler. Broken clocks are right twice a day, Scott. That's, there's no skill in doing that in the forecast. You could have somebody actually read that. If highs were only in the upper 80s or mid to upper 80s, they would consider that hot. So, when the choice is between rain and no rain, and in the summertime when you can have a shower just about every day, it's not there's no skill there to come up with a forecast. Tell me how many raindrops will fall. Tell me what the exact high temperature is. Tell me if there's going to specifically be some extreme weather event for that given day, and also be very specific as to what you're talking, what you mean. Then maybe I might be a little bit impressed, but I wouldn't be. Hotter today than yesterday in Orange County. Greenfire 919. Yes, inland areas some areas did get hotter. One of the things that happened yesterday was that we had this bank of clouds that developed up in New England during the early morning hours, and just kind of came and sat over this area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England down into New Jersey, from about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning till about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it wasn't enough to keep the temperatures from climbing to the mid and upper 90s, but that could be the reason why it didn't go over 100. I was actually rather impressed where I was, where it was a broken to high thin overcast, up until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my 1 o'clock temperature where I was in central Long Island was up to 94. I was shocked at how warm it got in spite of the fact that there was that cloud cover. So I think that cloud cover yesterday had an impact on temperatures by maybe holding them back by a degree or two. And today it was the south wind that came in and put a halt. Even though the launching pad today was stronger than yesterday's, we probably would have gone to over 100 had it not been for that anticipated wind shift to the south. No threat to land, says Anthony Orr, with Hurricane Fabio, probably going to get to at least a Category 3 as it meanders out to sea, and this is on the Pacific side. Other than that system in the northern Gulf, there is nothing on the Atlantic side to worry about. And Dio Nankumar, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot your question. Let me go back. I'm going back. Hold on, hang in there. Don't get too upset with me. Michael Burrell is, talking about horribly uncomfortable. Okay, so I guess the tropics not so quiet, but probably won't develop in the Gulf because it looks so disorganized. Actually, when you look at the signature on the satellite from what we showed earlier, it doesn't look. Not that I'm trying to carefully construct my language here. I'll bring it back up. From a meteorological perspective, the signature of it on the satellite is not half bad looking. It does have kind of a look to it. I'll bring it up front and center here. Again, if you look, it's got a bit of curvature. That kind of circular, semicircular look to it. It is there, but the problem is that where you would likely see where the lowest pressure is very, very close to land, and the axis here runs from the waters right onto the landmass itself. I don't believe that there's room here for development. You know what? If this were maybe a couple of 100 miles further south, you might see the low develop out in the Gulf of Mexico, 100 or 150 miles offshore. That would be a different scenario entirely, but not seeing it here. And I think that probably keeps this. Although I got to tell you, there have been instances of systems, if you look back over the last 15 or 20 years, there have been a few instances of where you've got systems very close to land, but enough of it is offshore, and when the Gulf of Mexico water temperatures are really, really warm, you've had some systems develop where you think, hey, this thing is really too close to land. How's it doing it? So it does happen from time to time. I don't think it's going to happen in this case. Maybe if we were deep into August or early September with water temperatures, at their peaks and everything else, in terms of climatology and everything else, where you could have some weird stuff happen from that along those lines. I don't think that you're going to see it this time around. You are going to probably see thunderstorms, weather, and low on Friday. Let me just double check, okay? I don't mean to, hit on you hard, but you got to kind of take it a little easy. There could be some thunderstorms Friday night into Saturday morning in your area, okay? So, and they could be strong. Wouldn't be a big shock to me if they were. So just bear that in mind. I'm not trying to, hit you very hard here. It's just that you seem to kind of lose it over stuff. So, and then you make these like extreme, you come up with these sort of extreme forecast ideas that just won't happen. And if they do, we're probably, in like serious trouble. So, you know what, just kind of take it easy there, okay? Let's see. Carl Weitz and Delvin are having their conversation about the official thermometer at Logan on the coast instead of Copley in Boston. Delvin and for Carl Weitz, I mean, don't they have a downtown thermometer in Boston? I mean, I was looking at some of the temperatures yesterday, and I mean, even today, if I go into, I'm going to bring up close to the map. Okay, so Boston itself, I guess at Logan right now, yeah, Logan is 81, okay? But I'm going to add, let's add some numbers here. Hang on one second, folks. I'm going to set up a map, and I'll bring it up front and center in just a second. So just bear with me, because I want to address this. You know, you got this question about what's going on in Boston right now. So hang on. Here we go. So these are 6 o'clock temperatures, okay? So if I could have pulled them back a little bit earlier, but that 81 is Logan, okay? You can see the inland temperatures as you go west of there. And Logan is very, pretty much right on the water. They are running every bit of 7 or 8 degrees higher in some places. And if you go further west, and let me just see if I can bring up what these, sometimes I can bring the obs up for some of these stations. Wayland is 90, and some stations come up sometimes and some don't. I guess it depends on how close up I am. Sometimes they respond and sometimes they don't. But you can see the difference. You just go on the west side of Boston versus the east side. There's a 10-degree spread in terms of the numbers. And if we look down, in fact, as I got this up, let's go down a bit further. I could bring up New York City and Long Island. You can see the temperature spread on Long Island from that 93 that's down here is probably, that West Babylon number is probably, that's incorrect. It's not 93. Might be the high for the day there. He's got 89 right now when I looked at that but you can see the upper 70s. See how the South Shore kind of runs, this is how it works around my neck of the woods here. The South Shore running in the upper 70s, and you go to the North Shore, it's in the upper 80s. And a 10-degree temperature differential is, I've seen, 20, 30-degree temperature differentials depending on the time of year. And then you go to New York City, where it's in the mid to upper 80s, but New York City itself got to 95 today, so if it wasn't for the south wind, if it was more of a west wind, it would still probably be around 94 or 5 at this hour of the day, which is coming up on 20 minutes before 7. And then head into New Jersey, where that wind off the water has less impact, and you're still seeing some readings up at 95, 96, 97. And then if you go down to south coastal Jersey, the south wind now also bringing in cooler air east of the Garden State Parkway. So that's kind of how it works around here. You use your highways as pretty good dividing lines as far as figuring out where you can outline something as far as the forecast is concerned, as to where you're going to see these big temperature changes when they occur. There I am. So anyhow, let me just come back to you guys real quick. I'm going to have to cut it short now. It's almost 20 before 7 o'clock, and I got a few things to do. So let's leave it at that, and let me just thank everybody who has used the Amazon link to support my channel. I really appreciate it. It's on the descriptor to this live stream and on the descriptor to the video in the video library. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for this channel to earn some fees from Amazon by linking to Amazon.com. So you shop on Amazon for your stuff, you get your stuff at great prices. Amazon throws me back some coin. I could get myself a couple of cigars out of the deal, and everybody is happy. So thank you very much for those of you who have, and I know a number of you have done that, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Nick Cortez. Thank you tonight for hitting Super Chat. I really appreciate that. The Joe and Joe Weather Show will be tonight at 9:15 on Facebook, so you be sure to check us out. The Joe will have his own opinions on the heat and humidity going forward. We'll have a bit more of a New York City, New Jersey, Lower Hudson Valley, Long Island, Connecticut perspective on everything in our Facebook show, whereas usually on this one I tend to go a bit wider, so it gives you a slightly different focus. So if you haven't tuned into us on Facebook, you can do that. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or Joe Rayo Weather, and that'll be tonight at 9:15. Have a great week. If some of you are using this week as a long 9-day weekend that started last Friday, good for you. Enjoy it. Be sure if you're in the hot and humid areas to stay cool. Common sense. I don't have to tell you guys on my channel about that. I'm sure you're doing all the things you're not doing crazy things like running marathons at the heat of the day. So just beware. And yes, New Orleans is bracing for rain. Okay, brilliant. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.